Hey everyone. Have you ever imagined hailing a cab but there's no driver?
Yeah, it's like the future is knocking, right?
It is.
Yeah.
That's the whole robotaxi thing. And today we're diving deep into two of the big names, Zoox and Waymo.
We've got a whole stack of articles here, some notes.
Yeah, we did our homework.
We're going to compare how they're tackling this tech, the cool stuff they're building, what makes each one kind of unique. You'll know who's ahead and what to watch for in this whole race to change how we drive in cities.
Right. It's not just about cars, it's about cities changing.
Exactly. It's
Yeah.
bigger than just replacing, the person behind the wheel. Robotaxis are part of this, huge shift in how we think about transportation.
Especially in cities, right, where it's already a mess.
Backed cities, yeah. Imagine no more circling for parking
Oh, the dream.
or those stressful commutes.
Okay, that does sound pretty good. But before we go full sci-fi on this, can you, break it down? What makes a robotaxi different from any other self-driving car? I mean, my car kind of parks itself already.
That's a good point. It all comes down to purpose. A robotaxi is designed specifically for those ride-hailing services.
Like Uber, Lyft, that kind of thing.
Exactly, but with no human driver. And they got to be able to handle everything that's crazy about city streets, pedestrians, bikes weaving through traffic, you name it, all while keeping passengers safe, of course.
So, purpose-built for the urban jungle.
Yeah, you could say that.
Okay, cool. Let's get to our contenders. First up is Zoox. They're already making some serious moves.
Zoox is definitely the newer company here.
The new kid on the block, but making a splash.
Big splash. They just launched their service in San Francisco, Andilo, Las Vegas.
Wait, Vegas? Seriously? That's a whole other level of chaos for a robotaxi to deal with.
It is. They're really jumping in head first.
I was also reading that Zoox is going all in. They're building everything themselves. The cars, the software, the whole enchilada. What's the logic there?
Control. That's the big thing. By building everything from scratch, they have complete control over how it all works together,
Ah. So they're not relying on anyone else's tech or anything.
Exactly. And you see that in their vehicle design, too. They're going fully driverless, no steering wheel, no pedals, just seats facing each other.
Whoa. That's a bold statement. They're really saying, this is the future, people. Get on board.
Yeah, it's a pretty radical departure from traditional cars.
And speaking of futuristic, their sensor system is insane. It can see over 100 meters in every direction.
And predict movements 8 seconds in advance.
8 seconds. That's better than most human drivers I know.
I know, right? Zoox is putting a lot of faith in that combination of advanced sensors and, predictive AI. Being able to see so much and anticipate what's going to happen means their vehicles can react faster and smoother to everything around them.
Okay, so Zoox is aiming for safety, but also a completely new kind of experience.
Yeah, they're really trying to redefine what it means to ride in a car.
But what about their competitor, Waymo? They've been in the game a lot longer, right?
Oh yeah, Waymo's the veteran here. They've been at it for years, got robotaxis in Phoenix, San Francisco, expanding fast. But their approach is more about, flexibility.
Flexibility, how so?
Well, they're not just doing one thing. They're retrofitting existing cars with their self-driving tech, but also developing their own custom robotaxis from scratch.
So they're kind of hedging their bets, trying different things out.
Exactly. It lets them get more vehicles on the road faster, collect more real-world data, which is super important for their AI.
So it's about getting that experience, learning from it. And of course, you can't talk about Waymo without mentioning Google.
Right. Being part of Alphabet, Google's parent company, definitely gives them an edge.
It's not just about the money, right? It's about all the resources Google has.
Exactly. Access to all that data, the AI expertise, it's huge. Think about it. They have millions of miles of real-world driving data from their test fleets, plus billions more from simulations. That's a lot of info to train their AI on.
Yeah, it's like they're giving their AI a masterclass in driving.
Pretty much. The more data they have, the better their AI becomes at, recognizing patterns, making predictions, handling all those tricky situations.
So it's like two different philosophies here. Zoox, with its cutting-edge tech and this vision for the future, and Waymo, with all its experience, data, and Google's power behind it.
It's a fascinating comparison, isn't it? Two very different paths, but both aiming for the same goal.
All right, so we've got a real showdown brewing here. But how do they actually stack up when you compare the specifics? Like their business models, their strategies?
That's where it gets even more interesting. Let's break it down point by point.
All right, let's do it. Welcome back, everyone. Last time we were cruising through the world of robotaxis, getting to know Zoox and Waymo.
Two very different companies, but both with big ambitions.
We talked about their tech, their strategies, and how their parent companies, Amazon and Google, could really shake things up. But let's be real. No tech revolution is without its, speed bumps. Yeah.
Oh, absolutely. There are some serious challenges ahead, and they're not all just about perfecting the technology itself. We're talking about the things that could make or break this whole robotaxi dream, like safety concerns, what happens to jobs, even like the ethics of letting AI make life or death decisions out there on the roads.
Yeah, those are some pretty big what-ifs.
They are, and we can't just ignore them.
So let's unpack them one by one. First up, safety. I mean, letting a computer drive us around sounds cool in theory, but how do we know these robotaxis won't go all Terminator on us?
Right. It's the million-dollar question, and both Zoox and Waymo know they can't just say, trust us, the AI's good. They have to prove it. That's why they're putting these things through the ringer, millions of miles driven in simulations, testing in all kinds of real-world conditions, even creating these crazy scenarios to see how their AI reacts in, unusual situations.
So they're basically throwing everything they can think of at these robotaxis to see if they hold up.
Yeah, pretty much. They're trying to anticipate all the weird things that could happen on the road. A sudden detour, a kid chasing a ball into the street, even those classic thought experiments where the car has to choose between hitting one person or a group. How does the AI even make those impossible choices?
That's cut heavy.
Yeah.
It's not just about programming the car to follow the rules. It's about teaching it to make judgment calls in situations that would, stump even the best human driver.
Exactly. And it brings up all these ethical questions, right? How much responsibility are we putting on AI? Who's accountable when something goes wrong? It's not just a tech problem, it's a philosophical one.
It's like we're in completely uncharted territory. Okay, so safety is a big one. But even if these robotaxis are proven safer than human drivers, what about the human cost? I mean, we're looking at mass unemployment for, taxi drivers, truck drivers, delivery drivers. A lot of people depend on those jobs.
It's a valid concern, and it's something policymakers and these companies themselves need to address head on. We can't just ignore the potential for job displacement. Some experts say, oh, new jobs will emerge in related fields, but we also need to think about retraining programs, support systems for those who are directly impacted.
It's like we're on the edge of this massive societal shift.
Yeah.
And we need to make sure nobody gets left behind.
Absolutely.
It can't just be about cool tech. It has to be about fairness, too.
Right, and that brings us to another challenge. Public perception. Even if the tech is safe, even if we figure out the ethics, people still need to feel comfortable sharing the road with these driverless vehicles.
Yeah.
And we've already seen some pushback, right?
Yeah, people protesting, worried about accidents, even messing with the Waymo vans just because, well, they can.
Exactly. Some people are just naturally wary of anything new, especially when it comes to AI and robots. So how do Zoox and Waymo convince the public that robotaxis are safe, reliable, and something we should actually want in our cities?
Yeah, how do you win over the skeptics?
Transparency is key. Both companies are being very open about their safety data, publishing reports, working with independent auditors, even inviting people to participate in their testing programs. It's about building trust through openness.
So it's like, come on in, take a look under the hood, see how it all works.
Pretty much.
That's a smart move. Okay, so we've got safety, we've got jobs, public perception. What about regulations? I imagine that's a whole other can of worms.
Oh, definitely. Regulations are a huge hurdle. Every city, every state, different countries, they all have their own rules of the road, and those rules weren't written with driverless cars in mind.
Right, it's like the laws are lagging behind the technology.
Exactly. So there's this whole legal landscape that needs to catch up, and that's not always a smooth process.
Yeah, we've seen those stories where cities are hesitant to allow robotaxi testing, or they put in place all these rules that make it really hard for these companies to operate.
It's a constant back and forth.
So it's not just about Zoox and Waymo getting their tech ready. They have to navigate this whole web of bureaucracy, too.
They do, and it can really slow things down. And then, even with all that, there are still those technical challenges that need ironing out.
Like what? I thought the tech was supposed to be amazing.
It is, but as advanced as these systems are, there are still areas where they need to improve. For example, handling unpredictable weather conditions like heavy rain or snow. That's still a big challenge.
Yeah, I mean, even human drivers struggle in those conditions, right?
Exactly.
So I can imagine it's even tougher for an AI to figure out.
Yeah.
What else? What are some other technical hurdles they're facing?
One of the biggest is what we call edge cases. Those rare, unexpected situations that are really hard to program for, like a sudden detour, a construction zone that pops up out of nowhere, a flock of birds crossing the road.
Oh, yeah. The things you can't really predict.
Right. These are the situations where human drivers rely on their intuition, their experience, and it's still a challenge for AI to replicate that.
It's like trying to teach a computer common sense,
Pretty much.
which good luck with that.
Right. And then there's the fact that these robotaxis won't be operating in a vacuum. They'll be out there with human drivers, cyclists, pedestrians who don't always follow the rules or behave predictably.
Oh, right. I hadn't thought about that. It's not just about the robotaxi being smart. Everyone else has to play nice, too.
Exactly. So there's this whole aspect of human-robot interaction that needs to be figured out. How do you design a robotaxi that can communicate effectively with other road users? How do you make sure people understand how these vehicles behave and what to expect from them?
It's like we're trying to merge these two completely different worlds, the predictable world of robots and the, well, let's be honest, often unpredictable world of humans.
It's bound to lead to some, let's say, interesting encounters.
Okay, I admit that does sound kind of funny. But on a serious note, it highlights how complex this whole thing is, bringing robotaxis into our already chaotic transportation systems. It's a tall order.
It is, and it's not just about the tech itself. It's about rethinking how we design our cities, how we interact with technology, even what it means to be a driver in a world where cars can drive themselves.
It's like this huge paradigm shift, isn't it?
It is, and while it's exciting to think about all the possibilities, we can't ignore the challenges. They're real. They need to be addressed.
Okay, so we've covered a lot of potential downsides. But let's not end on a totally gloomy note. I mean, this Tech IIS PayK, pretty incredible, and it could make our lives easier, safer. What are some of the things that make you optimistic about the future of robotaxis?
Well, for one, the speed of progress is amazing. Just a few years ago, self-driving cars were like something out of a sci-fi movie. And now we have companies like Zoox and Waymo offering robotaxi services in real cities.
That's true. It seems like every day there's a new breakthrough or announcement in this field.
Right. The momentum is definitely building. We're seeing massive investments, both from the private sector and governments. That means more resources for research and development, more policies to encourage this technology.
It's like the whole world is waking up to the potential of robotaxis.
They are, and for good reason. Think about the potential benefits. Fewer accidents, less traffic congestion, cleaner air. Imagine a world where transportation is more accessible, more affordable, especially for people who can't drive or can't afford to own a car.
Wow, okay. That does sound like a pretty sweet deal.
Right. So while there are challenges, there's also a lot to be excited about.
It's like we're standing at the edge of a new era of transportation. It's thrilling, but yeah, a little bit scary too.
I think that's a healthy way to look at it. Cautiously optimistic, excited about the possibilities, but also realistic about the challenges.
Okay, so let's shift gears a bit. I want to delve into how Zoox and Waymo are actually addressing these challenges. What are they doing specifically to tackle safety concerns, potential job displacement, and all those ethical dilemmas we've been talking about?
Well, both companies are taking these issues very seriously. They're investing heavily in safety testing, going above and beyond what's required. They're putting their robotaxis through all sorts of rigorous trials and all kinds of conditions to make sure they can handle pretty much anything.
So it's not just about passing some basic driving test. It's about proving that these robotaxis are ready for the real world.
Exactly. And they're also working closely with regulators, to develop safety standards and guidelines for these vehicles. It's a collaborative effort to make sure robotaxis are deployed safely and responsibly.
It sounds like they're not messing around when it comes to safety, which is good to hear. But what about the potential impact on jobs? Are they doing anything to address that?
They are. Waymo, for example, has partnered with organizations like the League of United Latin American Citizens, LULAC, to create training programs for workers who might be displaced by this technology.
So it's about helping those folks transition into new roles.
Exactly. It's a proactive approach, and it shows they're thinking about the human side of this equation.
What about those ethical dilemmas? That whole thing about AI making decisions that could have, like, life or death consequences.
Yeah, that's a big one. Both companies are exploring different approaches to this complex issue. Zoox, with its focus on purpose-built robotaxis, is designing its vehicles to be inherently safer by taking the human driver out of the equation altogether.
So it's like, if we can't trust humans to make the right decisions all the time, let's just remove them from the equation.
In a way, yes.
But how do you even begin to teach a machine to be ethical?
It's a tough question, but Waymo is investing heavily in AI ethics research, working with academics and experts to develop frameworks for ethical decision-making in these systems. They're also working on ways to make their AI more transparent so we can understand how it's making decisions and why.
Transparency seems to be a recurring theme here. If people don't understand how this tech works, they're not going to trust it.
Exactly.
Okay, so it sounds like both companies are taking these challenges seriously, but there's still a lot of work to do.
Oh, absolutely. We're still in the early stages of this whole thing, and there will be bumps along the road. But I'm optimistic. I think we can find ways to harness this technology for good.
It's about progress, not perfection.
Well said. Okay, let's switch gears again and talk about those powerful parent companies. Amazon and Google. We touched on it earlier, but I think it deserves a deeper dive. I'm especially intrigued by that potential synergy between Amazon and Zoox.
Yeah, it's a fascinating partnership. Imagine a future where Zoox robotaxis are seamlessly integrated into Amazon's massive logistics network. You order something online, and instead of a delivery van, a Zoox robotaxi shows up with your package.
That's what we called last mile delivery, right?
That's exactly.
Cutting out the middleman, making deliveries faster and more efficient.
Right. And Amazon's expertise in logistics, their huge delivery network, that could give Zoox a big advantage in this area. They could optimize routes, streamline everything, maybe even offer same-day or same-hour delivery services. Wow, that would be a game changer for online shopping. But what about Waymo and Google? How could that relationship shape their future?
Well, think about Google Maps. It's already the go-to navigation app for millions of people. Imagine all that data, all those mapping capabilities, integrated into Waymo's robotaxis. They'd have this incredibly detailed understanding of roads, traffic patterns, everything.
It's like having the ultimate GPS system built right in.
Exactly. And then you've got Google's expertise in AI, data analytics, machine learning. All of that could be used to make Waymo's robotaxis even smarter, more efficient.
It's like having a whole team of geniuses working behind the scenes.
Pretty much, but, having these tech giants involved does raise some questions too.
Yeah, like, could their influence stifle competition? Could we end up in a situation where just a few powerful companies control the future of transportation?
It's a valid concern. There's always a risk of monopolies forming when you have big players like this. But it's also worth noting that these partnerships can accelerate innovation. They bring resources to the table that smaller companies might not have.
So it's a bit of a double-edged sword.
You could say that. It's going to be interesting to see how it all plays out. Will we see a more diverse, competitive robotaxi market, or will a few dominant players emerge? Only time will tell.
I'll have to keep an eye on that.
Yeah.
Okay, I want to shift focus for a minute. Something that's been on my mind throughout this whole discussion is, like, the bigger picture, the societal implications. We're not just talking about cars here. We're talking about potentially changing how we live, work, interact with our cities. That's huge.
It is huge, and it's something we need to be thinking about carefully. Imagine a future where robotaxis are so common that private car ownership becomes a thing of the past. What happens to our cities? How do our daily lives change?
Yeah, I'm trying to picture it. Would our cities be quieter, cleaner, more pedestrian-friendly? Would we have more green spaces? Because we don't need all those parking lots anymore.
Those are all possibilities. But there are potential downsides too, right? What happens to the people whose livelihoods depend on driving? How do we make sure this technology doesn't worsen existing inequalities?
Right, it's like this amazing technology that could solve a lot of problems, but it could also create new ones if we're not careful.
Exactly. And it's up to us, all of us, to shape this future in a way that benefits everyone. We need to have these open, honest conversations about the potential impacts, both positive and negative.
It's like we're all in this together.
We are.
Technologists, policymakers, city planners, everyday people. We all need to work together to make sure this leads to a better future for everyone.
I couldn't agree more. And I think this is a good point to pause our discussion for now. We've covered a lot of ground, exploring both the promises and the potential pitfalls of this robotaxi revolution.
We have, but there's still more to uncover. In our next segment, we'll dive into some of the specific challenges and opportunities for Zoox and Waymo as they try to, bring robotaxis to the masses.
So stay tuned for the final part of our robotaxi deep dive. It's going to be a wild ride.
Okay, so we're back, ready to wrap up this whole robotaxi deep dive.
It's been quite a journey, hasn't it?
We've explored the tech, the companies, the good, the bad, the potentially ugly. But now I want to get practical.
Practical, yeah.
What are the actual things Zoox and Waymo need to figure out to make these robotaxis a common sight in our cities? Like, what are the real hurdles they got to clear?
It's a good question, and honestly, I think the biggest hurdle, even bigger than the tech itself, is proving to everyone, not just tech enthusiasts, that these robotaxis are safe.
Safe enough to be out there with us humans, right?
Exactly. People walking, biking, driving their own cars. They need to feel confident that these things aren't going to cause chaos. I mean, remember those videos of people messing with the Waymo
Oh,
vans?
yeah, yeah. Clearly, not everyone's on board yet.
Right. So both companies are going all out with safety testing, driving millions of miles in simulations, real-world tests in different cities, creating all these crazy scenarios to see how their AI reacts.
It's like they're trying to think of everything that could possibly go wrong.
Pretty much. They're trying to anticipate everything, a sudden detour, a kid running into the street, you name it. And they're not being secretive about it either. They're publishing reports, working with independent auditors, even letting some regular people participate in the tests.
So it's about being transparent, showing everyone they're serious about safety.
Exactly. Transparency is huge. The more open they are, the more people might start to feel comfortable with this whole idea.
Okay, that makes sense. Safety is obviously a big one. But what else is going to slow down this robotaxi takeover?
Regulations, for sure. Every city, every state, every country even has its own rules of the road.
And those rules weren't made for cars with no drivers.
Not at all. So there's this whole legal system that needs to catch up, and that takes time.
So even if Zoox and Waymo have the most amazing tech, they could still get stuck in bureaucracy.
It's a real possibility. Some cities are hesitant to even allow testing, and others create rules that are really difficult for these companies to follow. It's a constant battle.
I see. It's a lot more complicated than just building a cool car. What about the tech itself? Is anything holding them back on that front?
There are still some technical challenges, yeah. One of the big ones is dealing with tricky weather. Heavy rain, snow, fog. Those are still tough for AI to handle as well as a human driver can.
Makes sense. I get stressed driving in those conditions, so I can only imagine how hard it is for a computer to figure it out.
Right. And then there's the issue of what we call edge cases. Those are like the rare, unexpected things that are super hard to program for.
Like what?
Imagine a sudden road closure, a bunch of kids running into the street, a construction zone that wasn't on the map. You know, things like that.
Oh, right, the things you can't really predict.
Exactly. Humans can kind of improvise in those situations, but AI is still catching up.
It's like you're trying to teach a computer common sense, which
Mm-hmm.
good luck with that.
It's not easy. And then you got to remember, these robotaxis won't be driving around in isolation. They'll be sharing the road with human drivers, cyclists, pedestrians. And let's be honest, humans aren't always the most predictable creatures.
Oh, right. It's not enough for the robotaxi to be smart. Everyone else has to play by the rules too, which we know they don't always.
That's the thing. So figuring out how robotaxis and humans can communicate effectively, that's another big challenge. How do you make sure people understand what the robotaxi is going to do? How do you avoid confusion?
I'm starting to see the bigger picture here. It's not just about building a cool car. It's about integrating that car into this world that's already messy and unpredictable.
You got it. It's about making the tech work in the real world with all its quirks.
It's a human problem as much as a tech problem, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. And that's what makes this whole thing so fascinating. It's not just about cool robots. It's about rethinking how we live, how our cities function, what it even means to drive.
Okay, so we've talked a lot about the challenges. But before we wrap up, can we end on a positive note? What makes you optimistic about all of this? What gets you excited about the robotaxi future?
Well, for me, it's the incredible speed of progress. This stuff was science fiction just a few years ago. Now we have robotaxis on actual roads, picking up passengers. The tech is getting better all the time.
Yeah, it seems like every week there's a new breakthrough, a new company jumping into the race. What else? What are the potential benefits that make all this worthwhile?
Well, think about it. Cities with fewer accidents, less traffic, cleaner air. People who can't drive now would have a way to get around easily and affordably. Those are the kinds of changes robotaxis could bring.
That does sound pretty amazing. So even though there are all these hurdles, the potential payoff is huge.
It is. It might take a while. We might hit some bumps in the road, but I really believe that robotaxis will eventually become a normal part of our lives.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, what's the one thing you want our listeners to take away from all of this?
I think it's this. This technology is going to change the world, one way or another. So the best thing you can do is stay informed, stay curious, and be part of the conversation. Ask questions, learn how it all works, think about the good and the bad. Because the future is being shaped right now, and we all have a role to play.
That's a great point. Don't just wait for the robotaxi future to happen. Help shape it.
Exactly.
Well, that brings us to the end of our robotaxi showdown. We've covered a lot, from the nitty-gritty tech to the big questions about how this is all going to change society.
It's been a wild ride. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive.